Hello, and thanks for joining me on another episode of Leadership Bits. On this episode, we're going to talk about Agile. You keep using that word, I don't think it means what you think it means. This is a quote from one of my most favorite movies, The Princess Bride, which is also a damn fine book, by the way. I'm sure that you all have heard about Agile. You're doing Agile, right? I'm sure that you're doing it with quotes. What I see in pretty much every one of my clients is that Agile is only a word that we use without actually understanding what it means. So we're cargo culting whatever we think it means without actually getting the benefits. We're getting all the downsides and nothing in return, or not as much in return as we should get. And why is that? That's because you do not know what you're doing. You do not understand the meaning and reasoning behind whatever you're doing. And I'm saying you, and I'm not talking specifically about you. You might have simply joined the company or just following along with whatever process you've got. But I'm saying your organization as a whole. And maybe you understand. And yet, if your people, if the managers, if the individual contributors don't know what they're doing and why they're doing it, there's no way they can get the maximum out of it. So let's start with a few stories, and I'm sure that you're going to hear these, and I'm guessing like 50% of them are going to sound too familiar. First of all, let's talk about sprint reviews. You finished a sprint, an iteration, whatever, and you're sitting down to review it. Usually it's done with some sort of a stakeholder, maybe people from product, maybe just management, I don't know. And you're demoing whatever has been going on in the sprint to check it off and say that you have hit your deadline, you did whatever you're committed to. Too often, though, what happens is that people are so obsessed about getting that check mark in their card and making sure that no one thinks they did anything wrong or missed a deadline, that the whole review process is focused on saying, yeah, we know, we didn't get to that, that's okay, that's fine. Sweeping more and more issues under the rug and saying, yeah, we'll get to that later, and we get to that later. And, sometimes that's fine and dandy. But the issue is that if you finished a sprint, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, and what you have at the end of it is not a deployable feature, what actually have you been doing? You get me? I mean, think about leadership. They have been planning what to do, you and product and whatever, and you decided that this thing is worth the 3 weeks you have in a sprint or whatever. If you have to invest 10 more days into this in order to get anything out of the sprint, because otherwise you don't have anything deployable, you now invest these extra days to get something out of it. Isn't it a bait and switch, basically, from your team? They make it look like they just finished whatever they said they'll finish, but you don't have anything to show. That's the number one issue. When we do not have a clear goal and people are simply ticking off Jira tasks without understanding what is expected to be at the end of the sprint. What is the deliverable? What's the real definition of done here, right? Done doesn't mean I moved some task from here to there on Trello. Done means I can provide the business with impact. These are reviews. You're doing it wrong, I assure you. You need to achieve ownership, not just some basic metric that says we finished 90% of the tasks we had at the beginning of the sprint. Even more so, if we're already speaking about these tasks, I have a big issue with each and every single task being already laid out and researched and thought of and has a tight time estimation and assigned to each specific person when the sprint begins. Because I do not believe that this can be rational. Either, if you have gotten to the point where you can break down each and every single task and you know what each person on your team is going to do in a time frame of a day or two for the whole sprint and you've already assigned all of it, what it means is that you're basically chewing on their food way too much. If you know all of that ahead of time, you are taking away from them so much responsibility and ownership and authority. And I have to ask you, frankly, what is their job? Are they some sort of an insourcing company where you send them off very, very defined tasks to do? Is that the best you can achieve from your R&D organization? Is that really what they signed up to be? People who get tasks so chewed they don't have any place to think? And I'm certain that you're hearing this and you're saying, whoa, it's not that bad at my place. We're not doing it that way. But I assure you, you are most definitely leaning more towards doing it too much than towards doing it too little. And you should have that in mind high up in your list so that whenever you're chewing on these tasks, you default to not doing too much chewing, if that makes any sense. And on the other end of the spectrum is, of course, people who simply send on these huge amorphous tasks to be accomplished in a sprint where no one has any clue what's the done meaning here, referring back to our previous point, and of course means that people have no idea whether whatever they have is even doable in these 3 weeks or whatever they have. You need to ensure that you know what are the goals, what are the basic boundaries, so people know what they can do. They know they need to have a new sign-up page. It has to work on iOS and Android and whatever, but they have boundaries. It doesn't have to support, Face ID and fingerprints and stuff. It doesn't have to support Facebook Connect yet, but it most definitely has to have accessibility and the ability to reset your password or something like that, right? They need to have very clear-cut must-haves. Now, when you're doing this faux agile process, how are you actually learning? A big part of agile is to ensuring that your organization is growing and learning from one iteration to the next so that people actually adjust whatever they are doing. And I'm not necessarily talking about full-blown Scrum with story points and burn down charts and velocity calculations and whatever. I'm certainly not talking about that unless that floats your boat. What I'm talking about is even having really good retrospectives that actually move you forward. I believe I've talked about postmortems on my blog. I'm not sure if I've done a podcast about it. If you want to hear more, let me know. But retrospectives are very alike postmortems in that if you do not get to the real root cause of issues and you do not understand what is happening, what you end up having is some nice make me feel good meeting that doesn't have any real impact on your organization. I've seen countless retrospectives where people simply sit down and say, yeah, we should have known this library would take longer to integrate, and I should have known to send you an email sooner and stuff like that. And there's no root cause here. What are the main issues that could have made this sprint way better? And I always say that maybe product and leadership should retrospect stuff like sprints and decisions to put things into the sprint from like 2 months ago. Why? Because it's not just that we need to have things done, we also need to think about whether we're doing the right things. Review what you have already delivered a while ago and see if it actually has the impact and the results you wanted to have. This is something I talk about so much with my clients, the difference between efficiency and efficacy. Efficiency is doing something great. You might be wielding a hammer really good and hammering on it very fine and dandy. But if you have a screw, you should not be holding a hammer. You should be using a screwdriver, right? That's efficacy. Knowing that you are doing the right thing, not just doing it very efficiently. And too often, what we have is organizations that may be getting better at their efficiency, but no one is actively tracking efficacy. So we're piling on more and more features and development work and product work and design, and everyone are working, and there's all this busy work. But when it comes to the bottom line of impact, you can look back like a quarter or 6 months and you do not see any real significant movement of the needle. What have you actually accomplished? What have you done? This is what leadership is measured on, right? I do not care if you have a team that consistently hits every one single milestone. Every sprint is done 100%. No one cares if they're not moving the needle. If you have these 5, 6, 10, 20, 100 people doing things so efficiently, every test is green, no builds are breaking, they deploy 25 times an hour, No one cares if it doesn't have the business impact. And if it doesn't have the business impact, it's usually not their fault. Take ownership. It's your fault. It's product's fault. You should all make sure that what you're telling them to do actually has a positive ROI. I've seen countless of projects taking dozens of people, dozens of months, and getting nothing in return. You might feel that I have a lot to say about this, and this is, of course, the case because I've been in engineering for most of my life. I've seen this happening in so many companies, and this is the major part. It's okay to make a mistake, but if your retrospectives are not thinking in that meta sense and actually looking at what you decided to do, not just what you actually accomplished, and thinking whether that was the correct thing to do, whether you have already put up the right boundaries to decide to do it before handing it off to the team, that's a very critical thing that you should be focusing on. And that's a very major part in having a healthy agile process. Another pet peeve of mine with agile, in quotes, is when people constantly complain about product with a capital P, not knowing what they want, always changing stuff, not having things clear enough. And whenever I hear this, I get pissed. And you know why? Because we're in software. I can get it if people in Apple hardware engineering complain about, I don't know, the design not being final because they have to start making these things like a year ahead of time to actually be there whenever the product launches. I can get that. They have to make their machines a year ahead of time. So you need to decide. But we're in software, all right? I don't know if you remember, but I'm sure that when you started developing, you have this joy of seeing an issue, sending some code, deploying it on a server in like 5 minutes and seeing it improve. Seeing something in a user's hand for the first time and realizing, oh my God, facepalm moment. How could I have missed this? And then making a change. That's the essence of our business. That's the essence of software. That's why it's soft. Get it? You need to make sure that you do not have your ICs regularly complain about product not having everything figured out. Product's work is not to have everything figured out. Engineering will always have more questions and clarifications needed. Otherwise, what it means is that people in product and the senior technical staff helping product are wasting way too much time actually answering every single question before it gets brought to engineering. You need to make the decisions. You need to know when to ask if you should do this or that or not. Product and R&D are in the same boat. Your organization's task is to help them improve on the business as fast as possible. Sometimes improving on the business means testing things out and seeing what works. We do not have all the answers. Product do not have all the answers. The right relationship between these two functions is a relationship of helping one another and growing it from one raw idea to something that product and engineering can actually deliver in a sprint. Your task is not to hear about a brand new idea from product and say, that's great, but we can only do it after this major refactoring, or we can only do it after I hire 10 more people or whatever. Of course, sometimes you have to say that, but your default position should be to say, all right, that's hard, but how can we trim this down to something I can deliver on right now? Or what's the nugget here that you're looking for to actually improve the business, and let's think together what we can do to get this ball rolling, to see if this is even worth a bigger investment, etc. Accept that product will not and should not have all the answers ahead of time. And by having these tasks be something that you all work on together and chew on and shape together, what you get is more ownership and more authority. You get the ability to actually have an impact on what you're doing instead of getting tasks assigned to you by nameless Jira gods and having to execute on them. Having the ability to take part in actually massaging these and helping product get to where the business needs to get I believe is one of the best things you can do at a startup and at an enterprise. Cross-functional teams is something that we've been hearing about in Agile for so long simply because of this. You want to ensure that your people are truly working together, not having this cross-functional team that means, yeah, we have a full-stack person or someone that can do the mobile and someone who can do the backend on the same team. That's a step in the right direction. But truly cross-functional teams have in mind the product and the design as well, because all these functions together compose what you get as the real product. Same, of course, goes whenever people from all sort of other functions are trying to use their authority in order to shut down ideas as fast as possible. It might be engineering saying, no, that's too hard. We do not know how to do machine learning at that scale right now. It can be security, the CISO saying, no, there's no way we can do Facebook Connect or whatever. It can be legal saying, there's no way in hell we can send these by email. There are so many people who default to saying no. And while you should be saying no at a product level, you should not be trying to do everything possible. Whenever it comes to innovation, when people are trying to push the envelope, when people are trying to add some novelty to your business, to your service, to your app, to whatever you're doing, you should not default to saying, no, that's way too hard, or no, we do not do that. You should make sure that before you say no, you have a really good reason. And people should know that they're being measured for actual novelty and innovation, and not just for, hitting another deadline. Because what we're doing here is not being the best at hitting deadlines that don't make us break a sweat. What we are doing here is driving business impact. And driving business impact, tying this all up, is what Agile really means. Agile really means talking to people and understanding what they are trying to achieve instead of having the best Jira workflow that means you do not have to talk to anyone once you get a task. That's people over process. You want to make sure that you use all the amorphousness and ambiguity we have in our business to get more authority and ownership into your team. Make sure that you do not say, yeah, product changed their mind. You want to say, we are still investigating how to do this. This is all on all of us to find the best way to do it, and let's enable rapid change. Let's enable innovation. That's what we are measured on. That's what we care for. That's what we deliver. We do not deliver done tasks. We deliver business impact, period. I'm listening back and I realize that I might have come off too offensive and a bit too, engaged. But that's because this is something that's very near and dear to my heart whenever I see a new organization and I realize that once again I'm seeing the same issues. We should all be measuring ourselves on moving the needle. Think about that. Thank you for joining me on another episode. I hope you'll subscribe, however you're going to subscribe on however you're listening, to hear the next one. If you like this, please share, retweet, like, favorite, send by pigeon, whatever you can do. I'd really appreciate it. And if you have any remarks, any ideas, you have my email down below in your show notes, so just feel free. Thanks, and talk to you soon.